Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another video. In this one, we're going to be reacting to a new info dump that has come about the Gotham Knights game much sooner than I expected, by the way, which is a very good sign that maybe the game could come out early next year, mid next year. We'll have to wait and see. And so we got a ton of information about the game, the free world, co-op, side missions, playable characters, villains, side plots, etc. Is Batman alive? They address all of these issues in this fantastic IGN interview. I will say that overwhelmingly it's very positive, but there are one or two things in here that are really weird choices, and one of them is outright awful. Then I'm just going to pan, and I'll get to that in a minute. But overall, this is very good news. It addresses a lot of people's concerns, and without further ado, let's get right into it. So, Gotham Knights, our biggest questions answered from IGN. He explains here that he is sitting down with Patrick Redding, who is the creative director on Gotham Knights, and also the senior producer, Fleur Marty. Sorry if I said that name incorrectly. I'm sure that I did. I think it's French-Canadian, but anyways. Will combat feel like the Arkham games? Is that a familiar beat-em-up combat system? Of course, discussing the combat in the game, Patrick Redding, creative director on the game, said, "We have gone through and iterated on control schemes quite a bit over the course on the whole project, but it'll be a comfortable experience to people who are familiar with third-person brawler-type experiences. The way you're accessing some of the special moves and things like that can vary, I'm sure, but in terms of having both attack and defensive choices, having a range of combo choices, having variations in strike types and attacks, being able to combo in ranged attacks as well as melee attacks, all of that is there, and I think that will be comfortable for people who have played modern contemporary third-person action-style adventure brawlers." Okay, wow, that was really a mouthful. I will just say that what he's saying here is that it's not an Arkham game, but it's kind of similar to an Arkham game in the sense that it's still under the same framework and model, albeit the Arkham combat is totally abandoned here. I'm not saying that it's like the free-flow Arkham-style combat, but it is quite similar to other third-person combat-style games, of which many are based off of Arkham, actually. So that's kind of what he's getting at there, is that this is not going to be a totally foreign experience to people. Next question, are special abilities tied to the stamina bar in the bottom left corner? Patrick says, "It kills me how fast people pick up on these things. I shouldn't be that surprised, but yes, you have special abilities in your ability tree that you unlock, and you can choose to unlock it in different ways, as well as how you use your gear. And some of that will tie into the bar, and we'll be talking about that in the future." So we actually got a glimpse of Batgirl's special ability. It's very similar to her Injustice 1 ultimate ability, which I love. So that looks great, and, you know, we'll see what the other super abilities are. As I said, it'll kind of be like Injustice, a mix between the Injustice super moves and the Arkham combo takedowns, but I'm very excited to see the stamina bar and what level ups we can get from that, especially as the branching tree unlocks and we get more abilities, and we can use the stamina bar on things like batarangs and other things like that to kind of just improve that. So that'll be interesting to see. Is this a fully open world? Will areas be blocked off or gated? So for those who aren't aware, IGN is referring here to like games like Division 2, where it's marketed as a free world game, but it has a level up system, and you have to be at a certain level to enter parts of the world. Patrick Redding here says outright that it is entirely open world from beginning to end. You can free roam around the entire map just like in Arkham Knight, and there's no level cap, there's no siphoning off the map in any way. So that's obviously great news. I mean, a huge concern that some people clearly had, having played Division 2 and other games like that. This is a fantastic thing coming from WB Games Montreal, so great work there. What do enemy levels mean to the player then? Patrick Redding says, "It's true that as you are getting more powerful in your progression, you're going to see a sliding scale in terms of not just the level of enemies, but even some of the types of enemies that you're going to be coming up against." He talked about this in the Mr. Freeze mission. But it's not a grind. It's not a situation where you'll say, "Oh god, I have to go get this grind type of mission in order to level this, and then I can get to this." It's really that when you encounter open world crime activities, you're going to see a range. Some guys are going to be a little weaker than you, and others are going to be a bit stronger. And how you approach each of these situations, it presents you with some choices that you're going to have to make. Like, is this a situation where I'm going to maybe swap out a piece of equipment because I think I'm going to handle it better with a different piece of equipment, or do I think a more stealthy approach will be better? All of these are options that are available to the player, and the level of your enemy is just one factor in deciding that. So that's great to see there. We all want to avoid the grind of needing to get loot, like a Destiny situation, a Division situation. So a lot of games have gone wrong in this area, and it's great to see that they're proactive and cognizant of that. The way they're talking about it, it's like they're aware of these critiques of this type of game that they're working in this genre, and as a result of that, they're being very proactive in seeding our concerns and letting us know that this is not going to be a grindy game, although certainly the level up is going to have a effect on the game, but no difference than in, let's say, Batman Arkham City or Batman Arkham Knight, where you can level up your character. It's kind of the same thing here, except there's just not a number over your head and there's not a number over the enemies' heads. But it's very similar to what most all games do, and just making the enemies more difficult as time goes on. As you level up, the enemies are also increasingly difficult. That's standard and not concerning to me in any way. How different can the Gotham Knights become? Will my Red Hood be different to someone else's? Patrick says, between the ability tree for Red Hood and his gear spec and the way you can modify and upgrade both of his ranged weapons, his melee weapons, and his suit, absolutely. In fact, the range between character builds remains actually quite robust throughout the entire game. Okay, now this is really promising, but then you learn that there's something that complicates this a lot, and that's the thing that I hate, and I'll get to that in just a minute. How do character skins work? Are they made up of individual pieces of armor or full outfits? Fleur Marty says they're a mix of all of that. So just to be clear, when you talk about gear, we're talking about your melee weapon, your ranged weapon, and your suit, which has certain armor characteristics. And that's your style, but sort of skinning of the suit. Because we don't want to turn it into just a random crazy quilt, what we've done is we've got distinct suit looks, and then within there's accessory variation that the players can tap into, and that way you get a chance to tweak it and make it exactly the way you like it. So what he's saying here is that it's not like an Injustice 2 gear system where you can have any chest plate, any knee pad, any arm, whatever. It's not like that. Rather, there's going to be themes, and you can slightly tweak it within that theme. Now, I think there's still going to be a lot of customization in this, but I think what he's saying is they don't want it looking overly goofy. So basically, there's still going to be some limitations into what you can do, and you can't just intermingle random pieces off of different sets that look completely different. And I actually agree with that decision. Some people are going to be annoyed about it because people are very weird about their video game customization. I mean, customization is good in games, but some people bring it to a really weird point, even with the Call of Duty games having, like these weird accessories that you can buy to make the game look less realistic. So I don't know. I think that this is a great decision. I'm totally on board with this, and there still will be plenty of suit customization, even though you can't, it's not like Injustice 2 where you can mix all random things together, hosh-posh together. Okay, this is something we've been dying to know. What does co-op offer above single player? Can two players play co-op with the same character? Patrick says, because the characters are so distinct from each other, there's a bit of asymmetry, a bit of the complementary skill set and ability set that actually makes teaming up kind of awesome if you happen to have different characters. Now, if you happen to have two Batgirls, you can also do that, but the potential of having different Batgirl builds and how they look differently and play differently is really cool too. How immersion breaking is... It's so immersion breaking to be able to play the game with two Batgirls. Can we play a story mission with another Batgirl? I mean, he didn't specify here that it's just multiplayer that you can do this, but I think that imagine going to that Mr. Freeze mission and then it's Batgirl and another Batgirl. I mean, it's so immersion breaking when this is supposed to be, a narrative story game. It just rubs me wrong. Now, if we're talking about co-op multiplayer, I will say maybe, but in terms of the main story, having two of the identical character just with different skins and different abilities, no, I think that is not just something I don't like. It's the first thing I've heard about this game that is really, I think, a problem that they actually need to remove. So it's just totally immersion breaking, and maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe people are thinking at home of like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But I don't know. Just playing through the campaign and story where each character is supposed to be fully fleshed out in its own narrative, and having two different Batgirls would just be the most bizarre thing and be so immersion breaking. So I'm not in favor of that at all. But by the way, look at this still. Holy shit, that is really good. Okay, next question. Is this a games as a service? And Fleur says this is very much not designed as a games as a service. There's an ability tree, which is different for each of the characters, and then there's gear you can craft, and so choices that you're going to be making, but does not mean that this is games as a service. So yeah, basically this is going to be a light RPG game where it's role-playing in the sense that you can play as the same character throughout the entire story. We'll get to that in just a minute, but, and you're building your character, customizing it, and that certainly, I think does make it a role-playing game. But it's certainly not a games as a service game. It's not like Marvel's Avengers, and it was very much designed intentionally not to be that way. There is an ability tree which makes it an RPG game, but there is not any games as a service aspect. So that is fantastic to see. Next question. So Gotham Knights is a single self-contained story, and Fleur says yes, absolutely. That that you can also experience in solo if you want to. You're not going to miss out on anything. If you're playing single player, you can be offline if you want to. We think that teaming up and living that dynamic duo fantasy can be a really great experience for players, but we won't force it on them. And that's another concern I had. So think in the gameplay that we saw where Batgirl slides down the ice cave and then Robin comes right behind her. She catches her breath and says, hey, don't tell anyone that happened. Or if anyone asks, that was an accident. And then Robin says, oh, don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Does that encounter just not exist? Or does an AI co-op player load in? And if that moment doesn't exist, then is the story is essentially completely different with the lack of dialogue that you would have with another character. So in that sense, does it feel like we really need to have another co-op player? Now, I think that the best solution here, if I had to guess, and having not known a lot about the game, is to make it so that you can either do it totally single player, which would reduce the amount of dialogue lines in the story and drastically change the way that it plays, make it co-op so you can play it with a friend, or the third option, which I think they don't currently have probably, but should include, is making it so that an AI co-op player can fill in. So you can still play every mission with 2 players, but it's just an AI co-op. So when I'm playing through the game for the first time, I don't have to play it with a friend. Not that I don't like playing with friends, but I also will want to play through the story my first time totally by myself and immersed in the world without any real life connections of friends that I know in real life, breaking my immersion in the game. So no, I would not be in favor of that, and I would also not be in favor of only letting you play co-op in single player if you have a friend to play with. So I would definitely encourage having AI included there. Next question, why is it 2-player co-op max? And Patrick says, you can have 4-player brawler experiences, but I think the more you try to lean into that, the more you end up having to create environments that only really work for that. And if you look at the fantasy of the Batman family and when these heroes get together, it is often weirdly kind of a drop-in, drop-out scenario. They'll be rolling their solo crime-fighting efforts, and then they'll cross paths, and it'll turn out that they're the same guy, and, they're kind of joined forces, and they take that on, and then go in their separate ways or decide to team up some more. That's all possible in the current dynamic. Focusing more on the idea of the immediate team up allowed us to say, okay, we can build a world that works perfectly well for either solo play or pairing off. That sounds good to me. Again, I think we have a lot of questions that need to be answered regarding the way that co-op works in single player, but on the whole, that sounds good to me, and I like the idea that they're investing in making it feel immersive. The story has to feel immersive, and they're trying to do that by saying, hey, they're trying to justify in the comics and explain this is actually what happens in the comics, it's accurate to the comics, and not a weird gimmick that we took as a game to shortcut the comics. Ultimately what we're trying to ascribe to is playing through the animated series, playing through the comics from the 90s that we fell in love with, and the way that they can do that is by referencing them very heavily and making them feel like we're immersed in that world. And if it's a weird multiplayer experience where people are dropping in and out and the game isn't really built around co-op and it feels forced, then that wouldn't feel natural to us compared to playing through a full single-player story. But they're trying to make this immersive, and I really appreciate that. Those efforts are greatly valued. Next question, can I play as one knight all the way through? Patrick confirms, yes, you can. You could go back to the Belfry and say, oh, I've just unlocked the next major piece of the mystery, and I need to go deal with this thing. And you decide that this is the perfect opportunity to swap out and play somebody else, so we allow you to dip in and out of those characters. But we know most players will typically gravitate towards one hero that really reflects their style. But I think it's always possible for people to kind of sit there and incrementally play everybody if they want it. That's fantastic. It's very interesting to have that level of customization in terms of playing through the story, and it makes me wonder, will the game be 4 different games? If we play through the entire single-player story, then each character presumably is going to just talk to and, have dialogue spoken back to them differently. So, for instance, if Batgirl approaches the Court of Owls or Talon, she's going to speak to Talon much differently than Red Hood would. They're just totally different characters, just mostly because of their personalities. So I'm very interested to see how that actually plays out and works. I mean, you've got to think that Batgirl's version of this story would look completely differently to Red Hood's, and even just the way that he interacts and talks to other characters, again, just his personality and dialogue. So very interesting there. We'll see how that plays out. Next question. The gameplay trailer mentions that the player is halfway through Mr. Freeze's storyline. Are there multiple villain quest lines to follow at one time? And Floor says, that's probably more details than we're supposed to do at this stage, but yeah, that's the clue that we put in there. Yeah, you got it right. So basically, there are multiple villains that are occurring at the same time with these huge plot lines, and essentially, it will be kind of customizable in the main story. And Mr. Freeze is not a side villain, it doesn't seem. He seems like a main villain. And as a result of that, you can kind of pick which storylines you go through at which time and at what pace. So that is very interesting to see how that works. The next question is about the day-night cycle. This is something everyone has wanted to know. What is the time scale of the game? Is there a day-night cycle? And Floor says it's actually over many nights. So yes, we do kind of have a day-night cycle, but the daytime is when you spend your time in the Belfry. The Belfry is super central to our game because it's the base of operations. You get to go back there, analyze all the clues that you've picked up during your previous night, have a little chat with Alfred, craft your gear, and really prepare yourself for the next night of crime fighting. So yeah, daytime in Belfry, and then at night you're roaming the streets, fighting criminals, and unraveling the mystery. So this is great. I mean, this paragraph has so much good stuff in it. So the first thing they're saying is that it takes place over multiple nights. This is a first. We never had that with Batman Arkham, and it's a great creative move. It's just a great way to evolve the Arkham games and fix something that we've all complained about with them. And, the fact that the game takes place over multiple nights means we can have civilians instead of this apocalyptic meltdown occurring in all the games. This is going to be happening in a living, breathed-in Gotham. The next thing is she gives us some details about the Belfry, and she says that you can go back to it every night before you go out to fight crime. You analyze the clues you picked up the night before. You have a chat with Alfred, you craft your gear in the Belfry, and then you prepare yourself to go out the next night. So the Belfry is kind of the base of operations. That's where Alfred is. That's where all your gadgets and level up stuff is. And additionally, after that, you go out and roam the streets, and at nighttime is when you really fight crime. So I'm happy with this. I think it would be very weird for Batgirl to be running around during the daytime. I know some people want day and night cycle. I think this makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. I love everything that I'm hearing here. That sounds absolutely fantastic. Will the Knights be out of their disguises in the Belfry? Wow, this is a very, very pretty good interview. I mean, he has some very detailed questions that typically we don't see from mainstream journalists as it pertains to Batman Arkham and such. So this is great. Will the Knights be out of their disguise in the Belfry? You kind of get a hint of that in the trailer, actually. And Patrick says, it was important for us with the Belfry. Obviously, it plays a huge role in the game and how the player manages their character and the progression, but it is also a narrative space. It's a place where the characters are allowed to be seen and have facial expressions and talk to each other. So it serves a dual purpose, and it's a really effective way of using that space. That is fantastic. I really am so thrilled with that too, because I want to see characters interacting. I don't want to feel like, oh, I'm playing as Batgirl, I'm off on my own, and occasionally other characters drop in. I think the best thing that we can get from this game and this narrative is for all four of the Bat family characters to regularly interact and discuss and talk and have that relationship be at the fore in this game, is that relationship amongst the Bat family. That's ultimately what makes the Bat family interesting, is their disagreements and agreements and what makes them mesh, and also the camaraderie that they build amongst one another can be quite endearing, and the sacrifices that they will make for one another. So I would love to see the focus with the story on that. And as I said, that's difficult to do if you're out and about. So obviously this is going to be a fast-paced, action-paced game, and that's going to be great to see. But ultimately, those character moments in the Belfry are going to be some of the best moments in the game, in my opinion. Then they ask if this game was always meant to be an Arkham game or a non-Arkham game, and he says 100%. That was something we arrived at early on. We want this to be the start of something, not the continuation of the prolonging of something. So again, we get a tease here for future installments into this franchise, into the Gotham Knights franchise, which would be absolutely fantastic. Although I won't get ahead of myself. If the game is good, it'll be fantastic. But it's looking fantastic right now, so I have every reason to believe that I would love to see a trilogy of these games from WB Games Montreal. So next they ask Patrick, is Gotham Knights' story based on existing comics? And Patrick says, honestly, we could probably publish a reading list and post it to our website, and it would be an excellent way for people to get themselves more fully immersed into it. But to be clear, it's an original story. It's very much our interpretation of several aspects of the Batman lore and the Gotham City history, and we kind of synthesize them in a way that holds together as a very much unified storyline. Now, this is also great to see. They're clearly delving into the source material, the Gotham Knights comic run. I'm actually going to buy it and do some videos about it. So to catch you guys up on what this game is named after, Gotham Knights, it is a comics run that is very similar to the game that we're getting, where the Batman is out of the picture and it's just the Gotham Knights. So That's going to be very interesting to see how those comics stack up, and then also getting into the animated series, Chuck Dixon 90s. So that's probably a lot of what they're basing off, which is fantastic. I mean, that's the perfect era, and I like that they're not going super modern with it. Next question, could more stories be told in the Gotham Knights universe? Patrick Redding says yes, but I won't say more on that. And Flores says Gotham Knights is all about growth. There is room for growth. And a lot of people online have been misinterpreting this line, at least what I think to be misinterpreting. A lot of people are saying, oh, growth, that is games as a service. This game, there's room for growth. They're going to add more DLC and make it games as a service. It's not the way I perceived it at all. What I perceived is that they can do something similar to what Spider-Man is doing with Spider-Man PS4 and Miles Morales, where they're basically putting Miles Morales in the same map that they had built for, the previous game, Spider-Man PS4. In 2018, and there's no shame in that, and that's what she's alluding to, is that we could maybe get a 6-hour story DLC with Azrael as the next Gotham Knight, and it takes place in this map. It's like a $20-$30 DLC. That's the type of thing that I'm thinking of, is that they can take it in new and interesting ways. What people are perceiving it to be is like, oh, this just means it's games as a service, and they're gonna be scamming us for DLC and this and that. And no, I think that there's room for growth in exploring the Gotham Knights, even though the main four are just the main four. There's not like other characters in the main story, but potentially with DLC, potentially with building upon the map, potentially, there's a lot of room for growth, and they already had the illusion from Patrick Redding that this could be a franchise, and they wanted to create something new and not just piggyback off of Arkham. Now, the one thing I will say is kind of weird is that, okay, it's fine if you don't want to piggyback off of Arkham, but don't start your game where Arkham Knight left off. In other words, like, if you put the ending of Arkham Knight and the Nightfall Protocol and you put it right up against this, it looks like a direct continuation. It's like Batman dies, Nightfall Protocol, there's an explosion. This is what they even say at the beginning of the trailer, and Batman is dead. And then we cut over to the rest of the Gotham, all of his sidekicks, and they're like, oh shit, he's dead. And this is the realization that they're dead. It looks like it's just an extended version of the Nightfall Protocol. So what I am not questioning is, I think it's the right move to move away from Arkham. What I am saying is, why are you trying to carry on the ending of Nightfall Protocol and just not making it canon? You should have just completely gone a different direction than Nightfall Protocol. Now, if this is the story they really wanted to tell, that's okay, but I just think it was a really weird decision. If nothing else, change up the way that he dies. Instead of in a fiery explosion, like, make it so, he gets, I don't know, at the end of whatever, he dies some way, and he's actually the Nightfall Bat at the end of night, and then he dies, the Nightfall Bat. But I don't know. I'm just saying there's better ways you could do it, in my opinion. So it's a small nitpick. It just kind of rubs me the wrong way. It's like, wait, why are you using Arkham Knight's ending if you're not going to follow Arkham Knight? I don't understand. Like, just either do Arkham Knight's ending and make it a sequel. Now, that's the thing is, part of me wishes I would have really loved to see the Batgirl and Nightwing and Robin from that universe in a sequel game, even if the gameplay is a little different. But if we're following those characters exactly, voiced by the same people, and it's kind of a continuation of that would have been really cool. Now, the only problem is they made Tim and Barbara a couple, which sucks. So that's not good. But even with the fact that she was in a wheelchair, this is exactly, so like, the characters are exactly where they were in Arkham, which was kind of weird that that coincidence, that overlap, and then they don't want to carry it on. Which again, I think is the right decision. I maybe just would have started this game a little bit differently to differentiate it in some way, and the way that Batman dies, or something like that, or just the role that he plays in the game and where the Bat family's at, and that type of thing. So anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, and let me know what you think about this game being disconnected from Arkham. What do you think about all this detailed information about this potentially being a franchise with single-player co-op information, these new screenshots? I mean, lots of great stuff here, and enemy levels, learning about the open world, the different boroughs on the map. There's 5 different areas. I mean, so much great stuff here. Thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed, be sure to give it a thumbs up. My name is Slickmuff. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.